Hello and welcome once again to the Omdia Analyst Summit at Black Hat USA 2021. My name is Eric Parizo. I'm a Principal Analyst focusing on cybersecurity operations for Omdia, and I'm based in Houston, Texas. I'm thrilled you're joining me today for our talk on SecOps technologies and priorities for 2021 and beyond. Let's get right into what we'll be talking about today. This presentation is really about the future of SecOps in the context of two potentially game-changing solution categories, but we'll start off with some context by taking a brief look at what we call our Omdia SecOps tactical lifecycle. Next, we'll recap where SecOps is at today and where we need to go from here, and we'll do that with the help of our recent survey results. Then we'll dig into two technologies I've been spending most of this year researching: Next Generation SIEM and XDR. We'll cover what they are, how they're different, and why they should matter to enterprises. And finally, we'll offer some takeaways for enterprises and maybe a few points for some of our vendor friends too. And as you know by now, we're working very hard to make this an interactive virtual event for you no matter where you're watching from. So I'll be available in the environment to do my best to answer your questions following the presentation. So let's get to it. Whenever I can, I like to start my SecOps presentations with a look at what we call the Omdia SecOps tactical lifecycle. Successful outcomes in SecOps rely on a triad: technology, people, and processes. We talk a lot about tech and people in security, but processes often go ignored. But it's necessary to scope out process-centric considerations in order to achieve successful outcomes in threat detection, investigation, and response. And this is Omdia's high-level snapshot for how to start doing just that. And to be clear, by successful outcomes, I mean that for your organization, the threats that you cannot prevent, you want to detect them as quickly as possible, investigate to know what happened, why it happened, what's affected, and how to respond, and then conduct mitigation and remediation thoroughly and completely, and of course, learn from that, make progress as you go and make improvements. These tactics are just as important as the tools and the talent, knowing the right set of actions, the right tools, the right data, the right questions to ask, and the right steps to take. It's critical to figure out what all those elements are, define them, document them, and that becomes the process backbone of your SecOps program. I like to refer to all this as process codification. It's where the rubber meets the road. Or perhaps a better way to say it is figuring out where you want to go, what it takes to get you there, and what route you're going to travel. As you've seen in our other presentations today, Omdia recently partnered with our colleagues at Dark Reading on a survey exclusively for the 2021 Omdia Analyst Summit. And of course, we posed some questions about SecOps. First, we asked respondents to describe the current status of a number of standalone SecOps solutions in their organizations and whether they're currently deployed or being deployed, being researched or evaluated, not being considered, or not sure. There were some notable takeaways. First, looking at what's in place today, not a big surprise: EDR and NDR, endpoint and network. NDR also includes NTA in our survey. Now, both continue to dominate, followed by SIEM. As much as we focus on emerging technologies and their potential, the reality is that the core SOC today remains the ability to gather data from the endpoint and the network, analyze that, usually using a SIEM, and develop an understanding of what's happening in the environment and where the threats are. It's important from a visibility standpoint, and it's a reliable way to detect threats. Just about every threat at some point either traverses the network or lands on an endpoint. Our survey recorded interest in a lot of different technologies. Attack surface management there at the top. Analytics, of course. But the top technology currently being researched or evaluated was CDR, Cloud Threat Detection and Response. For a technology that's somewhat low on the buzz meter right now, so to speak, it ranked as solidly as anything. The move to the cloud remains ongoing, but most organizations are already there to some degree. Enterprises are looking to gain the same ability to detect and respond to threats in the cloud as they have on-prem, but it's a challenge. And as we'll discuss in a few minutes, I believe it's a key reason why interest in XDR is growing. Speaking of XDR, that's of course extended detection and response. Again, the numbers are close, but we found below average interest in XDR versus the other SOC technologies we measured. Why is that? Really, I think there are two main reasons. One, XDR is still very new. Enterprises are still trying to understand what it is, how it's different, and why they need it. And the second reason is that a wide variety of vendors are putting their own spin on XDR. They're trying to define it based on their own worldview in order to take advantage of growing interest around XDR. And unfortunately, that's actually causing some issues. But more on that later. And then lastly, reading between the lines a bit here, there's not going to be one all-encompassing SOC platform anytime soon. Many platform vendors often try to espouse that belief, but there are just too many unique products and ongoing interests from distinct buying centers associated with the SOC. Enterprises want best of breed, and they want best of breed solutions to work well together. Unfortunately, those two things usually run counter to each other. Now, that said, I do see next-gen SIEM in this decade, as we move along, fostering more SOC solution consolidation than we've seen to date. Standalone analytics, standalone SOAR, standalone TIP, threat intelligence platforms. Eventually, I believe all of those will fold into the next-gen SIEM because it helps facilitate that process smoothly from moving from detection to investigation to response. But the need for a wide variety of standalone solutions isn't going anywhere. So let's spend a few minutes now digging into next-gen SIEM. Omdia recently published our research paper on the fundamentals of next-generation SIEM. So if you want the 10,000-word version of what we're going to cover here in about 10 minutes, please reach out to our team here at Omdia. But again, we're going to try to cover the key points here just briefly. What is next-generation SIEM? To be a full-fledged NG SIEM, according to Omdia, there are 4 fundamental baseline criteria. First, your solution has to be cloud-based. SIEM architectures historically have been absolutely sprawling, with agents and collectors, logging databases, query systems, storage arrays. Just getting a SIEM deployment up and running has been a feat of wonder. And organizations just don't want to deal with that anymore. Plus, with digital transformation efforts increasingly pushing everything into the cloud, the SIEM just naturally has to go there as well. Ideally, we're looking for a cloud-native architecture, but it's hard to transition many of today's SIEM solutions into the cloud, and we recognize that many vendors are still on that journey. So cloud-hosted is also acceptable as long as it's a common architecture, as opposed to a custom colo arrangement. Next, any SIEM is only as good as its data. That's why next-gen SIEM solutions have to go beyond traditional logs to also include cloud logs, infrastructure, and SaaS, as well as the wide variety of non-traditional telemetry that organizations want to use for threat detection. In the context of a specific scenario, let's picture this. If nothing is more important to my organization than the proprietary data in my database, then it only makes sense that I need to be able to monitor every call to that database and every other metric I can find related to database activity. Same for hybrid cloud environments. If my infrastructure is spread out across 2 or more public clouds plus hybrid environments, if there's a sudden spike in latency or quality of connection between those environments, that could be a very important security metric for me. So next-gen SIEMs need the ability to capture all of that kind of data. Third, built-in behavioral analytics and detection based on baseline deviations. In my opinion, as a capability, there is nothing more important for every enterprise to have right now, today, to detect threats than behavioral baselining. There are organizations out there that are still using only rule-based detection systems, and those orgs are inevitably going to miss critical detections. Next-gen SIEMs are making the consumption of analytics much easier. And then there's incident response. This is a common point of process failure today in the SOC, where a SIEM facilitates the detection and investigation of a threat, but when it's time to take action to mitigate and remediate the threat, it's necessary to go to other tools, and sometimes critical actions get missed. Next-gen SIEMs need to do a better job smoothing out the transition from detection and investigation into response. And the best way to do that is with built-in response capabilities, or at a minimum, built-in response enablement, so that even if you use a third-party SOAR or other response solutions, you're not waiting for someone to activate a manual process. That response effort can just happen with the level of orchestration and automation that makes sense for a given organization. We'll briefly take a look at another survey results snapshot here. With the help of dark reading, we asked respondents how they ranked the importance of some next-gen SIEM criteria. And as you can see, there's really nothing they didn't like. They were slightly less sold on threat hunting, but otherwise enterprises are craving all the capabilities that next-gen SIEM offers, because for the most part, they've been a long time coming. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I wanted to show you our breakdown of how we categorize the capabilities within next-gen SIEM solutions. There are 4 categories. First, data collection is all the log management, data management, ingestion, and storage. Threat detection is, again, somewhat standard for SIEM, but with analytics now getting its own subcategory. To highlight the importance of response, we gave that capability its own top-level category, and we split event management and event analysis into 2 separate categories. Event management is the workspace aspect, creating a case, managing the process, grouping related events. And then event analysis is more about the extent to which the next-gen SIEM facilitates analysis of the findings, drawing of conclusions, identifying potential response and follow-up actions. And then reporting and management is where system management and compliance and reporting activities fall. And again, our new report on next-gen SIEM fundamentals gives you all the details you could possibly want on each of these subcategories. SIEM has been around for more than 15 years, almost 20 now, and it just wasn't evolving to the extent that enterprises needed it to. The industry has developed all of these supporting capabilities to prop it up, like analytics and threat intelligence platforms and SOAR. But at the end of the day, those are all just additional solutions that the SIEM has to interact with. One of the most important benefits of next-gen SIEM is a much faster, easier deployment. You're not going to ever totally avoid SIEM complexity or the need for on-prem components, but having the aggregation, data management, investigation, analysis, and storage all in the cloud takes away a huge infrastructure burden, makes updates easier, and obfuscates a good portion of the configuration and management challenge SIEMs historically have presented. I mentioned earlier that analytical baselining is critical for contemporary threat detection. But it's been yet another thing that organizations had to go out and acquire and deploy and fit into their SOC architectures. Having it built into the next-gen SIEM reduces complexity and puts the capability right at the heart of the organization's SOC architecture, where it can be most effective. And as we'll discuss, it sets the stage for more advanced detection methods that build on analytics. SIEMs to date have often not been very flexible in terms of process. With most solutions, your process basically needs to conform to however that SIEM works, and that's the end of the story. But the reality is that your threat detection, investigation, and response lifecycle is not going to be successful if your technology doesn't support the right processes for your people. Next-gen SIEM provides a seamless path from detection through investigation and into response, and that can make a world of difference when measuring outcomes. And at long last, next-gen SIEM is introducing much better pricing models. A SIEM that charges based on ingestion and storage volumes is asking customers to make difficult decisions about what data goes into the system, not based on its usefulness, but based on the cost associated with it. Today, in 2021, most organizations still cannot afford to put all the data they would like into their SIEM. Next-gen SIEMs are starting to change that by ushering in flat fee pricing, user-based pricing, and other alternative pricing methods that don't penalize customers for using the SIEM. Now, it doesn't negate the cost. SIMs are expensive. There's an unlimited amount of cloud-based storage out there, but it still isn't going to pay for itself. But the cost consistency and transparency of next-gen SIM is greatly improved. Now, this is my favorite part of the presentation, even though the ground beneath me gets a little bit shaky, if you will. But what I really like about next-gen SIM is that it paves the way for some truly phenomenal future advances that Omdia sees coming. These will have the potential to give enterprises truly meaningful new capabilities in threat detection, investigation, and response. First is what we call adaptive log normalization. One of the most painful parts of managing the SIM is parsers. There's always a need to write custom parsers or tinker with the existing ones when SIP system updates change log formats or add new data. It's unavoidable to a degree. It's just part of life with a SIM, but it's tedious, time-consuming work. A feature I expect to see in the future is next-gen SIMs will use artificial intelligence to identify new log formats, even when there's no vendor-specific template to work from, as well as create a parser schema for them with no intervention required. Or, when log formats change, it will on its own be able to analyze those changes and update existing parsers without hours of custom configuration. And next-gen SIMs will learn from the collective parsing customizations created and shared by all customers and use that knowledge for further refinement. It's not life-altering, but it's the sort of savvy use of AI technology that has the potential to save a lot of time for SIM engineers. Next is AI-driven event management. Seemingly unique events will automatically be compared to other events that identify commonalities that aren't apparent to human analysts. We're already making some progress on this today. A number of solutions have the foundation of AI-driven event management, but there's much more room for improvement. For example, if a behavioral detection finds something anomalous, something that's never been seen before, but maybe its behavior has similarities to another event from 6 or 12 months ago, that should be presented to the analyst automatically to highlight those comparisons. And then suggested courses of action for response can be offered on top of that. It's advancing the tech to build more automation into the event management process in ways that haven't been possible before. Omdia believes there also needs to be a great deal of advancement in terms of SIM data retention systems. Next-gen SIMs are in the early stages of transitioning from data lakes to what is called data lake houses. These combine the best of data warehouses with robust schemas for structure, organization, and management of data with data lakes, which offer a distributed, scalable system that facilitates unstructured data. This hybrid storage model is well suited for next-gen SIM because it supports the growing volume of data needed for analytics while supporting performance, streaming data continuity, data consistency, and data quality. An emerging discipline within SIM log management is the science of security-driven data fusion. This is the process when data, typically disparate data, from multiple sources is brought together and analyzed, usually using new or alternative methods. The goal is not only to approximate the current security posture of an organization within a given scope, but also to predict the likelihood of whether certain events may occur in the future. This will mean enriching logs with third-party data like threat intelligence, as well as cognitive learning from event resolution outcomes or vertical or regional threat patterns. And the natural extension of that data fusion is a capability we're calling predictive threat detection. Omdia forecasts that analytics will evolve to enable next-gen SIMs to project with consistent, quantifiable accuracy when certain unwanted security events are likely to occur. Consider a scenario in which the SIM received log data detailing an attempted first-time use of an application. Based on contextual elements such as the user's location, role, time of day, system usage history, as well as the system's baseline understanding of abnormal events, and then dozens, if not hundreds, of other data points, Omdia believes it will eventually be possible for a next-gen SIEM to forecast when a given event is likely to be a precursor to a security incident. It seems a little bit like science fiction today, and there are clearly a lot of potential benefits and implications. But Omdia believes that we will begin to see predictive threat detection develop during the second half of this decade. And it's why next-gen SIEM is so important. It lays the groundwork for these sorts of revolutionary security advances. Now let's shift gears and talk about another fascinating emerging solution, XDR, or Extended Detection and Response. XDR is one of the most promising emerging technologies to arrive on the enterprise cybersecurity landscape in many years. However, there are already quite a few interpretations of what XDR is, and that's causing some confusion. So, what is XDR? Omdia has a fairly rigid definition for what we define as a comprehensive XDR solution. It's a single, standalone solution, not an engine or a combination of third-party solutions, that offers integrated threat detection and response capabilities. So it's one solution to manage the whole TDIR lifecycle. It provides you with telemetry, your investigation, and facilitates the response, all in one solution. And it does this across several specific regions of the IT estate. XDR has to have endpoints and it has to have networks. You saw from our first survey question earlier, those are still the two most critical areas where the SOC has to have data to find threats. And then the cloud has to be included as well. The cloud is the third critical data source. XDR solutions must be able to gather data from your public cloud infrastructure, from your platforms, and from your SaaS applications. And then some XDR solutions also cover some optional areas as well, like email, mobile devices, and increasingly IoT or OT. One of the areas where XDR is truly different than SecOps technologies we've seen before, including SIEM, is in the way it goes about threat detection. Omdia breaks down XDR's differentiated threat detection capabilities into four areas. First is discovery. An XDR solution is constantly reviewing incoming telemetry using a variety of detection engines, as well as machine learning algorithms and behavioral analytics. Unlike static policy-based alerting systems, XDR is continuously determining whether an event is malicious, anomalous, or suspicious based on a variety of evolving indicators, including whether the activity has any precedent in the organization. Next is enrichment. XDR can automatically initiate an event enrichment process upon discovery of a suspicious or anomalous activity. Before an analyst ever lays an eye on the event, the system saves time by accumulating additional data points that a human analyst would typically gather manually to determine whether an event is a true positive. Then comes correlation. XDR solutions proactively correlate or review artifacts related to the event as a whole or simultaneously to make a conviction with the greatest possible accuracy. Because XDR typically standardizes the log data it takes in, that common format allows its analysis engines to find common data points that are indicative of a threat event quickly and accurately. And finally is presentation. When a threat is confirmed, XDR solutions present the findings to analysts by way of informative, compelling visual representations. These illustrate the sequence of events that led to or followed the threat. Specific data points are often visualized as events on a continuum or with a radar or spider graph. This helps SOC analysts understand, explore, and act on threats more quickly and decisively. Now, one of the biggest questions we're getting right now about XDR is, what's the difference between what Omdia defines as a comprehensive or all-in-one XDR solution versus what some vendors are calling OpenXDR? With so-called OpenXDR, a vendor offers the XDR engine, so it offers limited log management, threat detection and analysis, and investigative capabilities, and some response as well. But the data does not derive from the XDR solution itself. Instead, it relies on data from third-party solutions to power its capabilities. Now, there are potential benefits to this. Like many analytic solutions on top of traditional SIEMs, the OpenXDR vendors are positioning their solutions as SOC drop-ins. So what that means is that it can be a modular piece of a SOC architecture and work with existing EDR, NDR, even SIEM and SOAR solutions, augmenting those existing solutions and processes. That often makes deployment less disruptive and the solution itself more affordable than a comprehensive XDR solution would be. OpenXDR solutions also usually bring more flexibility from a data management perspective. Most comprehensive XDR solutions require a commitment to use the vendor's data lake. All the endpoint, network, and cloud data has to go there in order for the analytics engines to work. OpenXDR usually works differently, taking the data it needs from third-party solutions as it needs it. Of course, there are also some potential drawbacks to OpenXDR as well. Sometimes the OpenXDR solutions will require third-party data to live in that single unified data lake, like a comprehensive XDR or next-gen SIEM solution. Also, response options may be limited. Some OpenXDR solutions are based on SOAR, which of course have playbooks, but are again reliant on the functionality of the solutions they're integrated with. If some of this sounds familiar, it should. It's hard not to see OpenXDR repeating a lot of the same challenges that have faced SIEMs for many years. For a solution that's being branded as having a lot of promise for being a simpler, easier take on SIEM, this doesn't exactly sound ideal. OpenXDR can overcome most of these challenges, but as Omdia sees it, the deal breaker, though, is the data itself. The biggest benefit of comprehensive, these all-in-one XDR solutions, is that one vendor is providing you with your foundational threat detection data. So while it's less data than you'd have with a SIEM, of course, because you're largely limited to endpoints, networks, and cloud, it's obfuscating all the challenges of data processing, data normalization, data categorization. Those are all the areas that, to this day, SIEM solutions consistently struggle. If you don't have data that's accurately parsed, normalized, and put into proper context, no threat detection system is going to give you good, consistent outcomes. Comprehensive XDR solutions are going a long way toward addressing that challenge. As Omdia sees it today, OpenXDR solutions have yet to prove that they are doing anything differently to avoid the same data problems that have plagued SIEMs. However, I'll say we're still in the early days, and it's an area we will be watching and researching closely. Let's summarize before we wrap up. Going back to where we started, remember, all this talk about technologies doesn't matter if they don't support the processes you need to achieve your outcomes. So enterprises, make sure you're giving process maturity as much focus as you are advancing your people and your architecture. And vendors should make sure their solutions support the SecOps process maturity that customers should always be trying to advance. Now, we know the endpoint and the network are critical to TDIR, but the cloud is becoming just as critical, and organizations need to adapt to that. Next-gen SIEM has arrived. Remember, to truly be a next-gen SIEM, it has to be cloud-based, take in non-traditional telemetry, have built-in analytics, and also conduct response, or at least response enablement. But we're in the early days of next-gen SIEM. Enterprises have to keep pushing vendors to get to those future forward capabilities we talked about. And vendors need to not only push the envelope, but remember, AI doesn't always have to save the world. Taking away time-consuming tasks with AI can be just as important. XDR. I'm very positive on the future of comprehensive XDR solutions because they offer the promise of delivering enterprise-grade threat detection and response functionality to more customers than have ever been able to access it before. That's huge. Now, most products don't exactly live up to that promise just yet, but that's where XDR is going, and there's a lot happening there in the coming months and years. And as I said, I'm skeptical about OpenXDR, so make sure vendors can address the points about integration and data management and data storage. And vendors, I know this is some tough love, but you're doing yourselves and the market a disservice if you're marketing your SIEM light as an XDR. Ultimately, that approach won't work for anyone. Thank you again for spending your precious time with Omdia Cyber today at our Black Hat Omdia Analyst Summit. We invite you to join us in the chat following this and each one of our sessions today. And as always, we'd be grateful for your feedback. Once again, my name is Eric Parizo. Stay safe out there.